Hey guys, today we are talking about marriage. Everything to do with marriage, because we're experts. Not really. But we're going to share some of our own personal experiences, what God shows in His Word, what marriage should look like, and give you guys some good resources for if you have a struggling marriage, or if you just want some interesting details on what it's like to have a savage marriage. Come along for the ride, guys. All right, man. Well, back again.
Yeah.
I guess we'll keep doing this because people keep listening to us.
Yeah, for sure.
So-
I'm getting a lot of good feedback. So for everybody out there, don't be afraid to comment. Let us know what you want to hear, talk about. I know some of this stuff. It's just a lot of times you're sitting at your desk at work. You got the podcast on while you're typing your guts out on some computer code or whatever you do. But we would love to talk about recent events, things you want us to hear talk about, so let us know.
Yep. And real quick, you guys may have noticed I got a new shirt here.
It looks pretty good.
Move this microphone a little bit so you can see it. We have merch. We have that shirt, and we also have this shirt, which is pretty cool. We have wristbands, as I was so corrected the last time. We have a black and a white one for you guys that want to kind of share your beliefs and have kind of a conversation starter. So hit that up. That is on our store connected to our website, and we ship those out. I've already shipped out about a half a dozen shirts to different people all over the place, and so we'd love to see you guys wearing some of our merch. Hats. I just actually finalized some of the design on the hats earlier today, so hats will be here in probably a couple of weeks, and we've actually got hoodies that are actually being made right now with the same design as the black shirt. Yep. So we're going to have a bunch of righteous savages out there in their shirts and hoodies.
Maybe those people that are listening in Australia will order a shirt.
Yeah.
And then on our next shirt, we can actually put world famous righteous savages tagline.
Technically, because we're already getting downloads, we are world famous.
We're going to have to trademark that before,
yeah.
before it gets too late. So
yeah. We get to that. Sure. We'll have to do the world famous righteous savages barbecue too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
Oh, dude, I'm telling you, we're going to get way off track here in a second.
We're going to do a whole episode on cooking meat. Maybe we'll just get in the kitchen or out on the smoker on the deck or something, and we'll just
What was this episode?
Yeah.
We're doing? Marriage?
Yes. So,
oh, boy.
One of the things, and this is kind of like a lot of the other stuff that we've talked about, has become a hot button issue in a lot of ways because culture and society is just changing so fast. It's like everything in the world is counter to what us as Christians culture be pushing it. It's like we're becoming more and more counterculture. If you're, I think it was Mark Driscoll, a pastor from Texas, was saying if you're married, have children, and you work a job, you're actually a countercultural person. It's kind of crazy that we've gotten to that point. If you're a man who is married to a woman who has children and works a regular job, you're actually a counterculture now. Is that not crazy?
I used the phrase in the last episode, clown show, for life in general, and also the phrase that normal is not coming back. And things are just really seem a little sideways. But here's the thing, regardless of what you think about what's going on in the world, it's just like how we work firearms training and tactical training. We could sit there and try to tell people all day long, like, here's what you're doing wrong. And you're doing this wrong, and you're doing that wrong, and you're doing, all these things you're doing wrong. And sometimes, that might be true, but the real path to getting things straightened out is to tell people what they need to do.
Yeah.
Like, what's the right thing to do? Let's focus on that, because you might not ever figure out what really is wrong. But you do know, most people know what is right, regardless of whether they're in church or religious or whatever you want to call it. We're born, I think, as humans, as children of God, that we know we're ingrained with right and wrong. It's your conscience. It's your soul. And so everybody knows what's right. Let's just focus on what the right thing to do is. And there's a lot of ways to do that as well, but let's focus on how to do this right.
Yeah, yeah. And when it comes to something like marriage, I think the way to do it right is really we look at Scripture. We look at Scripture from the beginning. God created man, and he set him forth on a path, and it was out of the necessity of God seeing that Adam was, he said, in the Word, he says, it's not good for a man to live alone. And so he created a helper. He created someone for him to do life with. And that was a picture of the relationship that we should have with our Heavenly Father as well. And that's what marriage really is that it is a melding of two unique individuals into one. And it is very symbolic of our relationship with our Father. And if you're doing marriage right, it will draw you closer to each other. And as Christians, it will draw each of you closer to God. In his perfect way, God wants us to be drawing closer to him together, and that draws us closer to each other.
Yep. So John, I want to hear a little bit about you and your family. So how long have you been married? You know, when did this journey of marriage start for you? And kind of what was the foundation? Like what was the basis for, the foundation of your relationship?
Yeah, so my wife actually corrected me earlier on an episode because I didn't tell the full story of how we met, and so she was really upset. It's actually really kind of cool, but we met when we were in college. I had every intention of getting my degree, going to Texas. When I was stationed in Texas, when I was in the Air Force, loved it down there. The people had the same kind of views as me, so just place that I fit. So I wanted to go to Texas. And I had, I guess you could say, an infatuation with a girl that I was in class with, and ended up going out on a date with her. She was not interested in me at all. It was just kind of like, I think it was one of those, I feel like I have pity on this young guy, so I'm just going to go out on a date with him. No big deal. Say I did it, whatever. We were out on a date, and we met a group of friends, and my now wife was on a date with another guy. And we ended up by chance sitting next to each other on a table and or at a table.
How you doing?
Yeah. Ended up talking. Ironically, and this is kind of funny considering what I talked about video games last time. We were really big into playing video games, and she came over and played video games like a week later, and I was with that other friend that was on a date with her. He's like, hey, this girl's going to come over. I was like, oh, cool. And from there on, we became friends, and it started to develop into a friendship after I got back. I got deployed to Europe and Iraq at the time, and was romance at that point. And let's see, that was 18 years ago. So it's been a long journey. And
did both of you have a church or a Christian background at the time, or was that something that developed later, or kind of where were you guys at with your faith in the beginning?
So I grew up in church, and this is really, really an interesting little tidbit, because I had been very, very passionate about church and God and everything for most of my life through my teenage years. When I got in the Air Force, it was kind of like sowing my wild oats. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of partying. I did a lot of just things that I'm not proud of now, but a lot of sleeping around, a lot of that kind of stuff. Just if we're brutally honest, I did a lot of that stuff. And when she met me, I was kind of detoxing, but I still had a lot of that wildness in me. So, but she to this day said she saw something in me, because I would talk about God, and she's like, when you talked about God, it was like I knew you believed it, but I didn't really, it didn't always see it in you. And so we had some rocky parts, because she came to faith much later in her teenage years, really came to faith later on in her life than me. So she was somewhat new, 5-6 years to faith, but really did believe in God. And so she was attracted to that part of me, and not so much the party animal that I was. But so we had some rocky moments, but once we once we got married, I mean, still with any marriage, you kind of have those you're learning to live with another person. But once we got married, our faith really started to draw together, and we found a really good church, and we're currently still going to that church. So once we found a good church family and we're able to see other people doing life and doing marriage well together, it really helped us.
Yeah. I think it's so critical for a couple to have a foundation in their faith. You could, if, and there's a lot of people out there that I guess make it, they don't go to church, they're not religious, whatever you want to call it. And they might be married 40 years. I don't know. But for me, my relationship with Sheila, that the foundation in Jesus is the rock solid part of our relationship. And we know that everything else really doesn't matter in comparison to that. So the little bumps in the road or disagreements or whatever, both of us keep that in perspective and realize, you know what, all that stuff, we can work through that hopefully, but our faith foundation is critical. People ask me and Sheila all the time. We've gotten to go on some vacations the last couple of years, and we go out and we talk to people and like, oh, where you guys from? And we tell them where we're from, and we're here on an anniversary trip or whatever. And how long have you been married? We've been married 30 years. And the question that everybody asks us is like, wow, well, what's the secret? How have you been married for 30 years? And Sheila and myself, we're always quick to tell people it's our foundation and our faith in God. No doubt about it. That's number one. And then building from that is also having an attitude of service towards your spouse. The marriage is not a 50-50 relationship. You cannot get married and think, well, I've got my job, she's got hers. We go about our day, we cook dinner, and we do our kid thing, and then we just, talk for a little bit, and we're just together. It can't be that way. It's got to be selfless, and you have to be serving your spouse. And, without that, things become very difficult. And it's amazing how being selfless can stir the other person to be selfless as well.
Inspire.
And now there's the back and forth, and things blossom and grow. And so it's critical. Faith in God, number one, rely on spouse, unconditional. And this, you just model it off of what Jesus did. What would Jesus do?
Yep.
Jesus would not be so concerned about himself. He's always concerned about other people. For crying out loud, he died on a cross for us when we didn't deserve it. We deserved, people talk about, well, life's not fair. You don't want life to really be fair, because if it was fair, you get what you deserve.
Yeah. Jesus
came, and all of a sudden we're not getting what we deserve anymore. So, the way he selflessly lived to save the entire universe, we need to have the mindset of, how can I serve my spouse? And it doesn't mean that you're, just following that person around and just, doing whatever they say or being controlled. It doesn't mean that. It means you honestly want to do things for your wife, for your husband. And there's a lot of different ways to do that.
Yep, I agree. And that is definitely the foundation that we all have to have if we're talking about wanting to build a successful marriage that honors God and models what Jesus actually modeled for us in sacrificial leadership and inspiring each other to do better. That is, we sharpen each other. It can be sometimes frustrating, sometimes difficult, but it's worth it in the end for sure.
Right. Now, as we've gone along in our marriage and our relationship, one thing I learned years ago is that I'm not smart enough to figure out all the details of this relationship stuff. You think you can. You think you can figure it out on your own. Like, I know how to treat my spouse, and I know how to be nice, and I know how to take care of people. But we really don't truly know the psychological dynamic of human relationships. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of people do. There are people with PhDs and psychologists and psychiatrists, and a lot of people that have really worked on the relationship side of things. And a lot of those people are Christians, and they give really good advice. So when people ask, what's the secret to your marriage, and we talk about our foundation in God, I also highly recommend you do some research and some study on how to figure this out, because you won't just figure it out on your own. So there's some books out there, and I like to study. I like to research. In my job in law enforcement, we were always studying case law. You're always watching training videos. You're always trying to learn how to get better. You want to be the best cop you can be, the best SWAT guy you can be, the best shooter, the best whatever. And you can't just make that stuff up on your own.
Right.
Somebody has to teach you the way, and show you how to do this. And you learn from experts. So please take some advice from some experts. And I was never really a big book person, but when you start reading, things all of a sudden light bulbs go off and things really start making sense and start to click. It's game changing. So a couple books. One is The 5 Love Languages. This book has been out forever, like 30 years or something like that. This one is critical. The Love Dare is another book. I think Love and Respect is another one. So a quick little story about the Love Dare. So it's probably been, 10 years ago or so. I was on patrol at Carbondale PD. We got called to a domestic. And we show up to this domestic battery call, and there's a husband and his wife. They were having problems. The guy was drunk, very drunk, and the wife had been punched in the face or something like that. And the guy was pretty calm, but it was obviously been in a physical altercation, and the guy was kind of crying and upset. And we're like, man, what's going on? What happened here tonight? He said, well, me and my wife, we've been having some hard times, and so she made me start reading this book. I was like, really? Like, what book? And she started making you read. He said, I can't remember. It's something to do with something Dare. I said, I don't know the name. I said, and of course I knew the name of the book, but I said, is it called Dare to Love? He's like, yep, that's it. Dare to Love. She made me read this book, Dare to Love. And I said, well, how's it working out for you? And he said, not so good. He said, not so good. I think I'm going to jail. I said, yeah, man. I think that's where we're going tonight. So works for most people, I guess. Yeah. But seriously, if you're drunk, Love Dare probably isn't going to work out for you at the moment. But honestly, just amazing book. So you've got to dive into this stuff, and not just on your own. Dive into it as a couple, and with open minds and willing to listen to each other. And these aren't books about what's wrong. Like, here's what you're doing wrong as a man, and here's what you're going to have to do to make your wife happy. They're not those type of books. It goes both ways, and it's a way to really build your relationship and make it stronger and stronger and stronger. And so get into that, do some research, read together. One of the things me and my wife do daily, whether it's in the morning or night, is we sit down, we read some type of Bible chapter, and we actually read it together to each other. And then we've got some type of devotional we go over. It takes maybe 20 minutes. And it's time for us to be in the Word of God together, to talk to each other, to talk about how we're doing, what you're thinking about this or that. And it's a time for us to pray together. And we try to time to figure out what's hurting, how you're feeling, and you can pray for each other. It's amazing when you can say, hey, how can I pray for you today? Wow, I don't know. And then somebody prays for you, and you're building that relationship. You're going through tough times together. One of the reasons why there's so many guys out there that lean towards sports and the military and the police, because it's a group of people that go through tough things together. That's it. And that's the draw. It's like, we're going to battle on the football field. We're going to battle on the battlefield. We're going to go through these things. And you can get together with your spouse and battle through life together. You will get closer. There'll be that camaraderie with each other.
Absolutely. Yep. That is a big, big key. And I think it's something that we miss somewhat in culture, is that guys kind of want to escape that and go do this stuff with their buddies, but we should be really striving to do that with our spouse. If we're married, and we should be making them the number one priority of, hey, let's do this life stuff together. Let's figure out things that we can do together that are going to bring us closer to each other and closer to God.
Yeah, I'm going to say something here that might be kind of controversial. in your family, in the marriage between you and your wife and your kids and all that together, the most important relationship in that entire family is the husband and wife.
Absolutely.
The kids
100%.
are not the most important thing. And that sounds kind of mean to say. And what I mean by that is the kids are not in charge of running your life. They're not. The parents are in charge of running the family life. And that's got to be first. And that means maybe one day the kids don't get to go to their buddy's house, or one day the kids don't get to go swimming or whatever. If it interferes with the core husband and wife relationship, there's going to have to be some adjustment to that. So to me, that's the most important thing. Husband and wife, that relationship, that comes first. And the kids need to know that.
Yep.
The kids need to know, like, that's the most important thing. That's the engine driving the family. And that has to be put first, I believe.
Yeah. And that is definitely something, we learned that just actually within the last probably 5 years that our kids, we're really what we're doing with our children. We're preparing them for the world. We're preparing them. Me and my wife, you and your wife, that is our family units. That is who we are, till death do us part, spending our lives with. And so that should be our number one priority in everything. And I think that one thing that I just recently, John Lovell was on a podcast, and he was talking about how sometimes when his kids come up to him, and I've put this into practice recently, it's kind of funny actually, but when his kids come up and interrupt when he's having a conversation with his wife, he makes sure that they know you're going to wait. And he's like, and I might just make them wait a little bit longer if they come up and interrupt, just so they know this is the pecking order. This is, you're down here, we're up here. So you're going to be silent when the adults are talking. And I think it's important for children to learn that they're not in control. So many parents now, they get that kind of backwards, and their kids run their lives, and that is unhealthy, very unhealthy.
Yeah, man, it does spiral out of control in a hurry. I also kind of realized that, how you lived your life before you got married is not going to be the same of how you run your life after you get married. And if you expect to do all the things that you did single as a married person, things are going to start to crumble in a hurry.
Yeah.
And I hear guys say things like, well, my buddies want me to do this. And I think that anybody that knows me very well knows that I never did spend a lot of time going out and doing stuff with guys that I worked with. I would every once in a while, but it wasn't very often. I didn't always go on Friday nights to bowl with my buddies or go on Saturday nights to meet some guys somewhere else. And the reason was I cherished the time I could spend with my wife. And as a police officer, if you're somebody that works a job where your schedule is crazy, my schedule was usually midnights or evenings. So maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, leave, wife's home all evening, all afternoon, all evening, supper time, night, getting ready for bed, going to bed alone. 4 nights in a row. So when my Friday comes along, as a husband, I should be thinking about, what? I haven't spent very much time with my wife. What can we do? I want to do that. You should want to spend time with your spouse.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean you can't ever go golfing with your buddies. It doesn't mean that you can't go do things, but you should prioritize. Some things should just in general be more important than anything else. And I see a lot of guys get jammed up. It's like, my spouse, my wife, never lets me do anything. And they expect, well, I'm a dude. I got a job. I work. I got friends. I should be able to go do what I want to do. Well, if your first priority is not your spouse, then that's going to be a hard sell. Is it your wife? Are you sacrificing personal time and parts of your personal life to do things for her, to do things with her? You should be. As a Christian, we should be sacrificing to some extent. And, what's your focus? And so if we can, And it shouldn't be forcing people. It shouldn't be, you need to really focus on your wife. It should be, if you're married and in love with each other, it should be, I really want to do these things for her.
Yeah.
I saw, and it might be, I can't remember which one of these books it's in. I think it's in one of these devotionals, The Resolution for Men, Bible study, really good devotional style book. There's a story in there about a retired college professor that had been a professor for 40 years. His wife got Alzheimer's, and during the progression of the Alzheimer's, the wife would just pace back and forth like outside their home waiting for him to come home. And like her feet were bloody, like she just couldn't wait. And as soon as he got home, she was very relaxed, happy, good mood, all of that. And she was craving him. And so he retired and was like, I'm going to quit this job. And he was doing some missionary stuff. And he's like, and everybody thought, well, just put her in a nursing home. She doesn't even know who you are. Just put her in a nursing home. Somebody can take care of her and you can go do your mission work for God. He's like, no, this woman for 30 or 40 years sacrificed and took care of me. The least I can do for her now is take care of her. Like, so our focus should be a desire. Not that I have to, but I get to. It's like you cherish.
Yeah.
Honestly, cherish your wife. So, and that will drive, hopefully, all your behaviors in the right direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as we talk about that, that's a beautiful picture of what servant and serving your spouse is. But that's not what we're being taught nowadays. That's not what we're being taught by culture, by media, by anything. It is literally do this until it doesn't jive with what you want. It is do this until you don't feel love anymore, until you don't, get married. But if you don't, 2 months later, if you don't care about that person anymore, just be done with it. And we've started making this microwave mentality of what a marriage is, of just like, we're just gonna quickly do this thing. If it doesn't work out, no big deal. We have no commitment. There's none of this kind of stuff. And it's really creeping into, I mentioned something about this in the last episode. It's really creeping into what you would consider kind of the family side. If you're talking politics of like the right, it's actually creeping into there where it's like, well, the court system's all broken and it favors women. So men, don't get married because you don't need that. You just work on yourself. Be selfish. It's all be selfish, get the good job, make the money, do all this stuff. And then you can pick whatever woman you want. It's not about finding a person to do life with. It's actually about, self-service. And then you can get the really attractive woman that'll probably cheat on you because she's being, running around with all these other men too. And we're just in this culture of chaos when it comes to relationships. And I forget what it was. There was a study that came out that I believe it's like by the year 2030, it was like 50% of women below the age of 40 will be single, childless, and living alone. That's insane.
That's pretty scary.
That is, well, if you want to see death of a culture, death of a nation type stuff, that's it. Because, nations and cultures and churches and communities are all built on families. Everything is built around a family. It's not built around single people. It's built around a family. And if you enjoy the kind of comforts and all of that stuff that we have in this country, that was all built for families to survive. And it wasn't built for people that are just out for themselves being selfish. It was built around families. And if we're headed that direction, that's a scary, scary place to be.
Yeah, we need to be an example for our own kids so they know what direction to go. And we don't want our kids to just make up life on their own. We want to be an example of how a marriage should be, what it looks like, how you treat your wife, how you talk to your wife. Your marriage should be a reflection of your faith. Really should. If you claim to be a Christian, I know things happen, but sometimes Christians do go through tough times. Christians do get divorced. But if you're a Christian and like you're in an abusive relationship, for crying out loud, that's the stuff that is, just ridiculous. Like what is going on and why are things so messed up? And it's not like just because you have faith in God, like, oh, the people who believe in God, we've got this family thing figured out. We have all the answers. Like, no, it's not any different. It's all about, at some point, having that servant attitude. And one of the, I guess, specific tips I would give guys for relationships is you need to lose the need to be right all the time. If you get into a disagreement with your wife and there's an argument or, accusing you of, or whatever the case, sometimes, guys are pretty defensive sometimes about, when they start being accused of something or whatever. And if it turns into just an argument of, who's going to win the debate, things get ugly pretty quick. So don't always think about an argument or a discussion about a debate style thing where you need to win it. Mm. You need to prove. A lot of guys like, I'm going to prove to my wife that she's wrong and I'm right. This just isn't going to last very long. Nobody is going to want to be in that type of relationship. And it doesn't mean that you just sit back and take it, so to speak, but it just means that you are not motivated to win. It's your wife. I mean, do you really want to put her down and make her feel bad? There's ways to talk and have a discussion and make points, about facts, but you don't want it to be in a manner to where you're trying to win a debate, like you were debating Jimmy Kimmel or something like, and you wanted to prove somebody wrong. You cannot have that prove somebody wrong type. And so, think about, your attitude, and it's a lot of it has to do with self-awareness. Self-awareness is a big deal, just not in marriages, but life in general. And if you can't constantly gauge where you're at all the time with your attitude, your language, your tone of voice, it's easy for things to just spurt out. You say things you wish you hadn't have said, but you can't take them back because they've been said already, and they're hard to forget. So you need to be aware. I don't know how you teach self-awareness. I think some people just have it more than others. It's kind of like common sense. Yeah. But I guess the easy way to say all that is don't feel like you have to have the need to win an argument or win a conversation so much. A lot of times the conversations we get into are just, like they say, a lot of women will say, I don't want you to fix a problem. I just want you to hear me out. Yep. That's a big one. And I was always really big of, you know what, I'm going to fix this because I don't want to have this conversation again. And it's like, no, that's not the point of this conversation. I'm like, well, maybe I should start listening and trying to figure out what the point of this conversation is. And we'll start going from there. So lose the need to be right all the time.
Yeah. As a person who loves to debate, the shout out to my buddy Derek, who we at work every day we debate on who the greatest basketball player of all time is. Like, it's Michael Jordan. Let's just be clear. For sure. I mean, it's Michael Jordan. But love you, Derek, but it's Michael Jordan. But I am that person that wants to debate and wants to get facts out there and all that stuff. And I came to this realization probably in 2020 when I'm doing all this research and pandemic and all this stuff. I got pretty deep into the weeds in that. And my wife's just like, I just want to talk to you. And I'm like, but this. And it was at some point I was like, oh, I probably should back off of this and just really just be a husband, because I'm teetering on the point of just like really making my wife upset because I'm just blurting out all these facts and she doesn't care about that. She just wants her husband, so
this isn't a podcast.
Yes,
John. Yeah.
But I think that's such an important thing for guys to learn. Of you approach your wife very differently than you do your buddies or people that you may have disagreements with. Disagreements within the home need to be handled in a very, very healthy way. You mentioned love and respect. There's a part of that where Emerson Eggerichs talks about disagreements are fire. It's like a fire. And that fire can do one thing, one of two things. It can either burn the house down, or it can heat it and it can make it cozy and warm. And that's really what we're going for. I have a very dear friend of mine who goes to our church. He always says, when you fight, fight well. Fight for the right reason. Don't just get into a fight to try and prove that you're right, but do it to better the relationship, to better each other. And I think that's such an important thing.
Yeah, and relationships aren't made better in those arguing moments or the disagreements. That's not when, things get better. So you mentioned the Love and Respect book. So definitely Love and Respect. Get that book, read it. So just a couple things I pull up on my phone from that book. Emerson talks about this thing called the crazy cycle. When you get selfish, when you're not self-aware of what you're doing and you're focused on yourself, things start to spin out of control in a hurry, and it feels like nothing can be fixed. Like I can't get through to my wife, and the wife, my husband never listens, and all of a sudden everybody's butting heads and things get crazy. Obviously they call it the crazy cycle. So he talks about trying to fill your love tank is one way, and also trying to get off the crazy cycle, and we're getting this energizing cycle. And so to kind of get back into that energizing cycle, for the man, when you're focused on your wife, so learn to spell love with the word couple, C-O-U-P-L-E. So C stands for closeness. Your wife wants to be close to you. O is for openness. She wants you to be open to her. U is for understanding. Don't try to fix her, just listen. P is for peacemaking. She wants you to say, I'm sorry. L is for loyalty. She needs to know that you're committed. And E is for esteem. She wants you to honor and cherish her. So cherish her is also involved in like pursue your wife, date your wife, that type of stuff. For the guys to work at something, to have a project, to complete things. So for the woman, appreciate his desire to work and achieve things. H is for hierarchy. Appreciate his desire to protect and provide for the family. A is for authority. Appreciate his desire to serve and lead. I is for insight. Appreciate his desire to analyze and counsel. R is for relationship. Appreciate his desire for friendship. And S is for sexuality. Appreciate his desire for sexual intimacy. So it has to be both sides.
Yeah.
It's you are focused on her, she's focused on you, and all of a sudden it's like, wow, we're actually working together and we're firing on all cylinders here in the relationship. That's when things start to build, when you start focusing on the other person. It really starts to build if both of you are focused on each other. So you don't just try and solve how you can have more free time and you can do what you want to do, and you don't work on that. You work on your spouse.
Yep.
And it's not the recipe for a perfect marriage, but man, it's a recipe for having a perfect foundation for you to build on for your marriage.
Closer, getting closeness to God, getting closer to God and closer to each other. We are really sharpening each other, as it talks about that in the context of the Bible of men as one man sharpens the other. But I think in a marriage it's the same thing. We sharpen each other. We work each other into where we're just better people. I'm a way better husband, provider, father than I was 15 years ago when we first got married, because I've learned through some mistakes, but I've learned through us doing those things together. I think that it's one of the biggest parts of this is learning how your spouse reacts and how your spouse is spoken to. The love languages. You actually mentioned that book earlier today, or earlier in this episode, of the love languages. And knowing, I would advise any couple, new couple, old couple, if you've never read that book, read that book and find out what your love languages are. Mine very easily, and my wife will tell you this, words of affirmation. If somebody gives me praise, I'll go to the moon for them, and my wife will tell you this one too. Physical touch. That's my two big ones. And for her, it's quality time and acts of service. So if I'm doing things for her, or if I'm spending quality time for her, that fills up that love tank that she has. And that is, these are the little pieces of the puzzle that you learn and you navigate through years. And if you stay engaged, the rewards that you will receive, both from your spouse and from the Lord, are just innumerable.
Yeah, it's amazing. The power of realizing that somebody else is thinking about you is just thermonuclear. It is crazy. So when you leave your wife a note, she realizes, oh my gosh, he was thinking about me enough to actually write a note and put it in my car or whatever. Or, you bring home a flower after work or whatever. If it's gifts, some people, their love language is receiving gifts or giving gifts or whatever. And so just whatever it is, words of affirmation, quality time, doing those things for your spouse, at the bottom of all that means that you were thinking about them enough to do those things. And so when you realize, man, somebody was thinking about you, get a phone call from somebody that maybe you haven't heard of in 3 years, like, hey man, just wanted to see how you're doing. You're like, holy smokes, man, this person was thinking about me and they called me. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll call them next week or something, and it motivates you to do that type of stuff. So it's amazing that the more you do for your spouse is probably going to be reciprocated back to you as well. So that stuff is crazy. Definitely dig into those books, man. They are just eye-opening as far as our marriage goes. It was a complete turnaround. It's real easy to just get in a rut and do the same thing every day and just things. It's not like, we ever fell out of love with each other, but things get just like, what's going on? Things are just the same every day. Well, the problem is because I'm not trying very hard.
Yeah.
That's the problem. You sit back, you get comfortable. Oh, we're married. We're believers. Things are good. We got kids. We go to church. Like, why would we ever break up or why? No, this is never going to be wrong. And things might not be as good as you think they are.
Yeah.
And you can get lazy in a hurry, and that's when the wheels can come off.
Yeah. I think that one of the things, especially for us guys, we have this tendency to get comfortable and get kind of lackadaisical and get a little passive about stuff. And so as a man, I think that, I have this theory, and this is something I've worked out over and it's proven out through Scripture. But when we talk about the original sin for men and the original sin for women, I think that they're slightly different. I think that for men, the original sin is passivity. That when we look at, when Eve was tempted in the garden with the forbidden fruit, and Adam wasn't somewhere else. He wasn't miles away in the garden doing something else. He was right by her. He took the fruit. The Bible says that. And she gave some to her husband who was there. He was there. He did not fulfill his role as a husband to step in and say, no, we're not doing this. God told us, no, lead at that moment. And I think that is generally, we have this propensity to get into a passive mode as men. And so when we get in something, we're comfortable. Yep. Hey, we got the good job. We got a nice home. Mm-hmm. We've got the kids. We got the nice cars. We got the church that we go to on Sundays. It's super easy for us to get into that mode of saying, what do we really need to work on? But the reality is that's when we should be working the hardest. That's when we should be saying, okay, I didn't need to fall back into my easy chair. Yeah. I need to actually say, okay, how can I pursue my wife? Because the reality is she may be saying, what the heck are you doing? Like, where in the world are you? Where's the guy that pursued me so hard when we were dating and first married? Where is that guy? Because all I have now is this dude that just comes in and sits in his easy chair and watches the sports game, so.
Yeah. So here's my challenge for you guys out there. Do an audit of your life. So we talked about how your relationship with your wife, that should be the most important. That's the core of your family. Mm-hmm. That has to be the most important relationship. And if it is, let's see. So here's how you can do an audit of your life. Get on your phone and look at the text messages on your phone. And who are you texting more than anybody? Is it your buddies at work where you texted 47 times about the football game on Monday, and then you were on Instagram for 2 hours. You can check the screen time on your phone and see how long you were on your phone. So you're on your phone today for 4.5 hours. You sent 27 text messages. 0 of that was to your wife. This is a sign that your priorities are off. If you really cherish your wife as number one, there should be some evidence in your life that that's a fact. Did you call her? Did you text her? Did you leave her a note? Did you say, hey, how things going? Hey, did you call and ask, hey, can I help out? Can I bring home some food? How much of a relationship are you having with your wife during the day, while you're at work, while you're gone, while you're out of town? And do an audit and figure out, where, we're tracked by everything. Figure out where your priorities are at. And there's a digital trail that everybody leaves of what you do all day long. It's pretty easy to look at that, and sometimes it's embarrassing. Like, golly, man, I am spending, if I have enough time to spend an hour and a half scrolling through Instagram, what else could I have done in that hour and a half to make my wife happy, to show her that I'm thinking about her, to focus on that, or my kids, or whatever else that might be more important than screen time or YouTube or those type of things. That's where, man, if anybody were to ever have me guess what the downfall of society is going to be, I'm holding one right here, and it's stuck to me all day long. And there's not a whole lot we can do to get away from this. But man, oh man, if somebody said this was it, I would believe it in a second, because it just drags so much of our attention away from personal relationships. And so anytime we can kind of limit that the best we can, and I'm not saying don't ever use your phones. Obviously, we're doing a podcast that's going to your It needs to be balanced, and you need to know where your priorities are for sure.
Yeah, one challenge, and this is a challenge I would give to myself too, because I don't always do it well, but I know Pastor Michael, Cornerstone Church, where we go to church, a few years ago, he did a marriage series where he talked about, when you get home, put your phones away and really focus on your family. We did that for a while, and it was great because we no longer had those distractions. And that would be something that, like, I would say for any couple that's struggling, put those things down, or any couple that really wants to find each other again, put those things down when you get home, unless you absolutely have to use them. If you on call for a hospital or something like that. But if you're just using that as a tool to check out at your house, put that thing someplace. Both of you and your spouse put it someplace where it's not readily available, and sit there and be with each other, present in the moment. And you'll be amazed at how just that simple step of connecting with your spouse personally will start to fix a lot of those issues. Yeah. It's not really difficult, but it is also difficult because we crave that attention from, it's like a drug. Those things are like a drug. They give us a dopamine hit. They give us all of these things that we crave. We can get all that stuff from our spouse if we're just engaging. If we're another analogy that I believe it may be Emerson Eggridge or one of the other authors that we've talked about. He talks about a bank account, making deposits into a bank account. And if we're constantly depositing in that bank account, when we go to make a withdrawal, it's a lot easier because the money's already there. It's the same principle. And if we're depositing in each other's bank accounts, then when that thing comes up that maybe, hey, honey, I need to go this weekend and do this thing, it's going to be fun. It's not going to be that big of a deal, because we've already deposited that
you
time.
You can't just take
Yes,
all the time.
You cannot, because you overdraft that thing, and guess what? Your marriage is probably not going to last long if you keep on overdrafting that bank account.
Yeah. And speaking of spending time with each other, another specific tip or advice I would give is try to eat together as much as possible, whether it's getting home after work, whether it's, eating lunch, breakfast, whatever time you can spend at a table together over dinner. We really tried to make that a priority when our kids were little, of always having supper together. Nobody got to go eat in their bedroom by themselves and watch some TV show. When it's supper time, we're all sitting at the table. And this is where we're going to be and have supper together. We're going to eat together and try to talk to each other and have that time together with each other. It's really important, man. I can remember when it wasn't too long after I got hired at Carbondale PD, that was 98. And about 2001 or 2, I remember I got into bow hunting pretty heavy. And probably for the next 10 years or so, I bow hunted a lot every year. And, that meant, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, going out in the woods till it was dark, coming home. And almost every time I went out to go hunt and I came home, my wife had hot supper made for me. I'm like, this is crazy. I've got a wife. Here I am spending time away from the family, going to hunt, could be doing a million other things. And I come home and not only is she like not reading me the riot act about, being gone all day, but she's giving me this gift of hot food. Like, this is crazy. I almost felt guilty, and that motivated me to want to be more selfless to her. And so just the small things like that are a big deal. And I realized, number one, how good I've got it. What an awesome wife I have that would be willing to provide that type of, life for me. And then it's, all of a sudden you get off the crazy cycle, you start reciprocating with each other. And it's, that's kind of where everything really gets energized.
Yeah. And I think that to kind of turn around and talk about something, we've talked about really good marriages, because I think both of us have overall good marriages, through a lot of hard work and a lot of deposits in the bank account and some mistakes and failures along the way. But I think that one thing we haven't really talked about is those people that are in marriages that are tough right now, people that are maybe struggling. And to them, I would say God calls us to fulfill our role as a husband or a wife in our marriage. He calls us to do those things that we're supposed to do. Doesn't mean it's always easy. It doesn't mean that it always feels good, but if I could give anybody advice that's in a struggling marriage, maybe your spouse is just not interested. Maybe you're on the brink of divorce. Maybe you think it's over. But we can always reach out and hit that stop button from the crazy cycle, and we can start acting out the things that we know God has called us to do. And we don't do them for anything. The easiest way to do it is that we're doing this as unto the Lord. We're not doing it for brownie points or anything like that. We're doing it as unto the Lord, and we know that He's going to bless it one way or the other. So I would give you advice to pray for your spouse. If you're in that tough situation, pray for them. You'd be amazed at what just praying for your spouse will do. It can change an attitude. I've seen that happen in my marriage, where we had maybe a knockdown, drag out fight, and I go home, or I drive into my car or something, and I'm like, I'm going to pray for my wife. And I come home and it's like the attitude's completely different. God can change people's heart. He can deal with people's emotions, and he can do miraculous things. And so I would say pray, and then do the things that we know that we're supposed to do, and do them as unto the Lord.
Yeah, prayer. So first, in my mind, first of all, there's nothing God can do. So as bad as you think you have it, there's something going on with drugs, or there's, infidelity, or some crazy things going on. And you think, well, this is way beyond fixing. Well, God can do anything. God created the universe. God can fix anything. There's nothing God can't do. So pray, first of all, number one. And I also promise you that if you read a couple of these books, Love and Respect, number one, and probably the 5 love languages, number 2, do that. I dare you, like Love Dare, do that together as a couple, and things will drastically change. I don't know how they couldn't change. Yeah. I don't know how you could read those and not have an improvement in your marriage. And it doesn't mean you have to figure it's like you don't get cleaned up to go to church. You don't have to figure things out. You don't have to have a solution. You just move forward. I think there's a phrase out there that says, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies those who are called.
Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. That means you don't have to have the answers, the solution. You just have to start moving in the right direction based on God's love and desire for us to have a healthy relationship and to be selfless towards each other. Treat others like you want to be treated.
Yep.
And I think that would be critical. And, don't be afraid. We're not, marriage counselors. We're not here to tell you how to solve a marriage where you're having problems or having issues, but pray to the God of the universe who can fix anything, number one, and either go get some counseling, get us some books together, and start moving forward in that direction, and see where things go from there. And I would be willing to bet there would be some improvement big time in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we'll close out kind of with, we're going to close out with this, because we're almost out of time, but I think that let's do a quick call to we're kind of geared towards men and men's issues and what men are dealing with. So we're going to say, as men, be a leader. And being a leader is not sitting back on your couch and letting your wife handle everything in the home. It's not checking out. Being a leader is being actively engaged with your wife and your kids. When you get home, I'm going to quote another great friend of mine, Pastor Dustin from the church, where he told me this several years ago, and it's stuck with me, is when I get home from work, I'll sit in my driveway sometimes, and I think, okay, now I'm going to my next job, because this is the job that really counts. And I think that is the mindset that we need to have as men, as godly men, as guys that want to be righteous, is to go into our homes and treat it. This is the job that actually counts, because these are the lives that I have the most effect on. These are the lives that matter the most to me. So don't shy away from that. Don't just let this world and all of these distractions and all of these lies that are being told to us on a daily basis distract you from what your job is, and that is to lead your home. Lead it with everything that you've got in you every day. Don't take a day off. If you're going to take a day off from something, take a day off from the gym. Don't take a day off from leading your family. Yeah. And I think that is something that every man listening needs to take away from this. Lead by example, through service to your family. Don't take a day off.
Absolutely.
Yep. So I think we're pretty much out of time, but it's been a great discussion. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in again. We're really excited about where this is headed, and we're going to be doing some tactical training stuff coming up, and putting some more of that content out. We've got a Patreon that's going to be starting here before too long for you guys to get some kind of behind the scenes stuff and maybe some extended episodes where we talk a little bit more candidly about things. And we have our merch that just dropped, so I hope that you guys will support us and flash your Gucci Righteous Savages apparel out. That's on our website, righteoussavages.com. Hit up all of our social medias, share them with your friends, anybody that you think might be interested in what we're talking about, that wants to be a better leader, a righteous savage, for lack of a better term. That's kind of a catchy name. I think we should.
Yeah, let's go for that.
Yeah. But anybody that wants to be a part of this, we welcome you with open arms, and we'll hope that you'll join us, and we'll see you guys next time.